Hi guys, and first of all, my apologies if my voice is sounding weird, but I got hit by the seasonal flu. It's we are entering now winter time here in Portugal, and as always, you think that you're tough as nails, and well, apparently not. So I got a little bit of a cold going on here. Nothing else. I've tested myself. And yeah, so apologies if my voice sounds a little bit weird or off. Anyway, what's today's review? Today's review is the KZ PR1, and I'll be reviewing both of them, both of the variants, the balanced and the hi-fi version, and I'll be comparing it with the PLA1, the CCA PLA1, and with just three other planars, the Stellaris, which for reasons for which I'll go into in a few minutes, the S12 for the obvious reason that we know, and the Zetian also for the obvious reason that we know. I mean, these two are probably two of the top ones. I didn't include here the P1 Max just because of not wanting to overcomplicate things, and I think that this selection here is suffice. But nevertheless, I'll touch up on the P1 as well. Anyway, what did I test the KZ planars with? Well, the TK2 over there in the top corner on the left, my NX7. I also had it hooked up with my DX3 Pro Plus and with my A50S. And then in terms of smaller dongles, I used the Q-Style, the M15, beast of a dongle, beast. And I used as well the J. Kelly AP90. I mean, for those of you that haven't heard about it, this looks like the Moondrop Moon River, but it uses the AK4493 deck, and amazing. Honestly, if you can get this for the $75 to $90 that I've seen it, buy it. It's a no-brainer. It honestly is a no-brainer purchase. So while there is, grab it, you won't regret it. It's an amazing little deck. Anyway, on to what we are talking about today, which is the KZ planars. When I tested the CCA PLA one a couple of weeks ago, the biggest complaint, or it wasn't really a complaint, it was the way that it was tuned, was the fact that they had tuned it with excessive bass energy. And that excessive bass energy, which is a good 4 or 5 dBs over, for example, the S12s and the Zetian, just congests the whole sound. And so the mids and the highs, which are by themselves amazing, because if you actually then EQ this down, you won't believe it's the same IEM. They get all closed in, and we are left with this monster V-shaped signature, which is great fun if you like listening to EDM and some rap and so on and so forth. But if you like listening to vocals and you want to get a better feel for other style of music, it's not probably the best choice. Nevertheless, having said all of this with regards to the PLA1, I liked it, I enjoyed it, and I'm actually in the process of retuning one now. I think it's a fantastic effort by KZ. The fact that they've actually used their own in-house developed planar driver, a 13.2mm driver, as opposed to what the majority of the other manufacturers are doing, which is getting off-the-shelf units already available, 14.2, 14.5, 14.8, but they basically, in essence, always the same driver. Anyway, the PLA came out, and then now recently KZ came out with their variant of the planar. They've got two versions. They've got the balanced version, which is this one here, and the balanced version can be distinguished with the hi-fi version. Obviously, as you can see, I'm not using the standard cables. Okay, so the balanced version, the balanced version has this gunmetal gray faceplate with the transparent shell, and you can actually see the driver inside there. Okay, while the hi-fi version has the same metal shell but in a more silverish color, and then the rest of the shell, I cannot really say if it's plastic that's been colored in the same way as the faceplate, or if it's actually metal. when I touch one with the other, it sounds like plastic. It doesn't give me this, you see, that's metal, that's got a more dampened sound. So I'm assuming that this will be actually plastic as well, and they've just covered it up with it's also got the coloring of the faceplate. Anyway, be it one or the other, they look absolutely stunning in my opinion. Look very nice. This new KZ style, I enjoy it. I really think it's been well designed. It fits perfectly in my ears. I've actually got no complaints with regards to the fit, although they are big IEMs. They're not exactly tiny, but compared to, for example, the Stellaris, they fit much nicer. As I said, I'm not using the standard cable. I'm using some XINHS and some tri cables here, 4.4. And to cut a long story very short, and to excuse me, my apologies. To cut a long story short, and to kind of spoil things slightly, I'm going to say that the hi-fi version of the PR1 is in essence a Wu Zetian or an S12. Okay, it's a smaller version of the Wu Zetian or the S12, and by that I mean what? I mean that the way that it's been tuned and using foam tips, and the foam tips have got a reason for that, you get a sound which is 95% of those two. And when you consider and when you factor in that it costs $69, this then means that we are in the presence of the cheapest planar, true planar, because the Gumio doesn't fall into that category, the Celeste Gumio. We are in the presence of the cheapest true planar earphone in the market that sounds good, that sounds really good, okay? I mean really good. And that for those of us which, spending $70 is the absolute maximum, but you want to enter this planar hype and you want to have something planar and not have to deprive yourself of other things, there you go, my friends. KZ PR1 hi-fi version. Beautiful. If the PLA, the original planar, was suffering from excessive bass energy, which clouded the rest of the spectrum, and that brought, like I said, excuse me, that brought a closing down of the sound in terms of its mids, vocals, tonality, timbre, everything just sounding off. It was fun, it was engaging, it was great, but it was off. This has gone completely the opposite way. The reason why I'm not talking too much about the balanced version is simple. The balanced is basically a PLA in where that area there of around 5, 6, 7 has been it's basically let me put this in a different way. It's got basically the same signature above 1K as the hi-fi, okay, and then the bass of the PLA. And the difference between the PLA and these two is that the area of around 5, 6, 7K is slightly reduced as compared to that same area in these two. What it in practical terms means is that the mids, and if I'm looking at just the mids of all of these, they are all good. The mids are not an issue. Perhaps the fact that one there is slightly laid back can possibly mean that with certain vocals, especially female vocals, you have less fatigue in the long run. Although in my case and with what I'm listening to and so on and so forth, I honestly didn't find that to be the case. Purely in terms of the mid, so above, let's say 500 hertz even, any one of these three IMs is very good in that whole above 500k area, where things then get a little bit out of hand. And that's been one of the complaints that's been had, is that because that area there of the 5, 6, 7, 8 is a little bit over energetic, being for a planar, and then we have a whole we got a lot of energy past 10k, we get this kind of very typical planar timbre, which can be a little bit too much, too fatiguing at times. If you're not into that thing, the same thing that happens with BAs. It can give you a certain dizziness, a certain to the sound, and can render things just excessively. Cymbals, they sound unrealistic. So it would have been nice if it had been slightly toned down. What was the way that I found after testing multiple tips, because this is something that I'm now going to start to do more regularly, following the whole issue with the MT3 from TRN. With the foam tips, you bring down that past 10k significantly. You bring it down a lot, and then what you end up with is a very nice bass signature. I'm talking about the hi-fi now. Very nice bass signature, good sub bass, good mid bass, pin again, peaking at just over 2k, and then it's gradually falling down. Okay, gradually falling down, as opposed to before where it was actually basically maintaining itself flat until around let's say 10k. It dipped and then it shot up again to an even higher level than the previous plateau. Now with the foam tips, it peaks and then starts dropping slightly, dips, and then when it comes back up, it carries on with that lower level. So the overall balance is way more well obtained. Coupled to that, you lose about a dB or two maybe at the lowest of the lows, which further enhances that equilibrium, I think, of the frequencies. And in essence, what you're left with when you actually graph, and I'll show you this in a few minutes, when you actually then see the graph of the PR1 balanced and you compare it to the S12 and you compare it to the Wuzetian, you have an IEM which is graphing very similarly to those, with the differences being basically in the amount of energy that you have in the post pin again peak. Okay, but everything in those three, and if I listened like I did back to back to these three, and trying to be as quick as possible in exchanging one IEM to the other, okay, none of them really stands out in a significant manner where I say, oh no, the S12 is better than the other two. No, the Wuzetian is better than the other two. No, they all kind of are the same thing. Yes, of course. When I really start nitpicking and really start getting into the nitty-gritty of things, yes, I do see that the energy here of the S12 can be a little bit harsh at times as compared to the Wuzetian, and that's why the Wuzetian comes out on top as compared to the S12. Okay, but it's minimal differences and very much music genre dependent, and I do notice some of that as well happening a little bit here on the PR1. But honestly, and being as sincere and as straightforward and as devoid of any sort of bias or anything of the sort, PR1 hi-fi foam tips, fantastic IEM, fantastic, worth every single one of it, $65 to $70. Honestly, I've got nothing to gain by saying this, absolutely nothing to gain. Okay, I'm just trying to let people know that do not have the possibility of going as far as the Wuzetian or the S12, that they've got now this as an option. My apologies, I had a bit of a cough that was about to come out and I had to stop. Anyway, as I was about to start talking, as compared to the Stellaris is equally an IEM that has loads of energy, after its pin again, and that was its main pet peeve, I guess, was that amount of energy was a little bit of excessive and could lead to fatigue and so on and so forth. The difference between the Stellaris and then the KZ CCA Brotherhood here is that it doesn't have the bass that these ones have, and because it doesn't have the bass that these ones have, it ends up being more limited and not as versatile. So I guess you could perhaps do some monitoring with this if you wanted, as long as you're not expecting to have absolute fidelity with regards to timbre and tonality, because being excessive like it is and not having the bass to then back it up, it can lead to some not realistic reproduction of those aspects of technicalities. but it doesn't have the bass, so it's not going to be something as fun, as engaging to listen to some EDM or hip hop or something of the sort. While you can listen to that on these ones and some rock and everything, and it's gonna be fine. On the Stellaris, my apologies, it's not gonna be as easy. Anyway, that basically covers this part of the review. With regards to the technical aspects of things, the PR1 with the foam tips, very decent soundstage, plenty wide, good imaging in my opinion, micro details, absolutely awesome. I mean, if anything, perhaps it's got too much at times, or it gives you the perception of being too much of, or it can make it, any one of these can make it like the song has got too much of those. But if in these two you don't really notice it because the bass overpowers things, over here because the bass has been brought down, you notice all that ability to go and fetch little details and nuances and everything. I mean, for example, Up and Up from Jeff Ryan, or All Would Envy, or even Papa Was a Rolling Stone. You hear it on here and you end up listening and hearing things that you don't listen so easily, or that you don't pick up so easily on the PLA or on the PR1, the balanced version. So yeah, technically, in my opinion, very, very proficient, especially when you consider again the price. Great in terms of, like I mentioned already before, bass, mids, and highs. Tonally, it's the more correct of the three by a mile, and in my opinion, keeps up very well with the Wuzetian in that aspect as well. So tonally, it's very correct. I would say that perhaps the male voices are the ones that come out the nicest over here. Instruments, again, for the most part, are fine. I mean, Up and Up, for example, it's got this trumpet, and I like using this song because the trumpet and the saxophone, you can, if it's done in a not ideal manner, it can become very fatiguing very quickly. And while on the Stellaris, for example, it becomes pretty fatiguing after a little bit, especially if you start cranking up the volume. Over here, I never really had that issue, and I listened to the whole song at a reasonable volume, trust me, and it didn't really bug me or bother me. As for power requirements, and I say what I've said many times before with regards to Planars, it needs power. It needs power. Yes, corrected to my AP90, it worked beautifully. And it actually benefited from the fact that this is perhaps more a darker sounding DEC dongle. With the Q style, no comments. We already know what we're going to say. With the TK2, because the TK2 has got a more bright nature, this picked up on it. The thing with having all this detail that you mustn't forget, or being capable of all this detail, is it will pick up very much on a good recording and on a bad recording. So if you've got a well-recorded thing, it will make it shine. If you've got a bad recording, it will let you know that it's a bad recording. So that's kind of the issue here when you have an IM, be it Planar or BA or whatever, that's highly resolving, highly capable of picking up on all these little things, these little nuances. And that's it, guys. I mean, like I said, my congratulations out to KZ. I think they've, with the hi-fi version, with the hi-fi, I think they've really hit the nail on the head. Yeah, I mean, I can only wait to see if they will actually bring out an improvement of these Planars with then that upper end area already brought down slightly, thus enabling a wider variety of tips and being more user friendly for the majority of people. Because I mean, some of us don't like foam tips, some of us just cannot fit the foam tips in properly. You want, in my opinion, the IM to be designed in a manner that it's as versatile as possible in every aspect. You want it to be versatile in terms of what it can play. You want it to be versatile in terms of how many people it will be capable of being used by. If you want to enter niche segments, you can, I guess. But then, obviously, you have to be on a different price bracket, and people already know that it's a niche product, so they have to pay that premium. But if you want to have an IEM at this price, which this means that you want to reach the masses, then you got to be more general in every aspect. The other little small detail that I wish that KZ would improve, and I don't think it would mean a drastic price increase, is it would be nice. It would be nice that if in the more higher end products of theirs, they started including a decent cable. I mean, TRN can do it. The Wu Zetian, okay, is already in the $150 range, but okay, let me go for something even closer to this. You can pick up now, for example, a P1 Max, and it costs $99, and it brings a perfect cable. The KZs, they still are stuck on that cable from I don't know how long ago, and it just doesn't do the IEM justice. It doesn't, and I wish that they would actually start improving on that aspect. Hopefully they'll take that in as well and start doing it on the next ones. Anyway, guys, I'll show you the graphs now in a second, and yeah, that's it. Take care. As always, like and subscribe, and any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you. Hey guys, and welcome now here to the graph section of the KZ PR1 review. Anyway, let me just take away all this whole confusion here, so we can start where we need to start. Alrighty, I'm actually going to start with the CCA, with the PLA1, and this is the graph of the PLA1 using KB07 tips. As I mentioned in my review, I tried a whole bunch of different tips. I tried 6 different tips, but I'm only going to show you the graphs of the 2 that I believe worked overall the best. One is the 07 tip, be it the large size like you see here or the medium size. The graph is basically the same. The medium size has just a little bit less energy there, and this one is the same IEM but using foam tip. Okay, T400 foam tip, and as you can see, basically a slight little drop there, not really noticeable, but then we reduce this energy here. So as I was mentioning in the review, it makes things a little bit more, instead of having this continuous or an even increase in energy like you see, it maintains it. Alright, anyway, this is the PLA, and then this is the PR1 in the balanced version. So in everything a PLA, the difference being only here. Okay, there is a more pronounced amount of energy here, but then again that peak and everything. So you notice that above 500k they were basically the same thing. Well, sorry, you notice it's always the same thing in the case of the PLA and the PR1, the balanced version. Here is the differences. Okay, here is the difference. But when you actually hear it, it wasn't really very noticeable, this difference. Okay, and then finally the HIFI, which is yeah, here we go. Okay, and that's the HIFI. As you can see, the HIFI basically, as I said, keeps itself the same as the balanced above, let's say 500 Hertz, okay? But there's a difference of 5 dBs in the base energy, okay? Again, 5 dBs as compared to the PLA, and it's noticeable. It makes for, where before you notice that there's an overpowering of the lower frequencies as opposed to the mid frequencies, now that doesn't happen. If I actually take away, if you see here, 77, 89 and a half more or less. So everything stays within a 12 dB window. Fine, okay, it's a V-shape, but it's a nicely done V-shape. There isn't much bleed. It almost is flat by the time it finishes the mid bass, so there's not really that amount of significant bleed into the mids. Pin again, peaking at, let's say 2.5k, maintaining itself nice and plateaued. And then the dip, a slight dip here, and then energy. With the foam tips, which is what, okay, with the foam tips, as you can see, it drops, and as I mentioned in my review, it maintains it, and then there's a drop overall. If you actually go and average this out, there's a drop in the way that the response is. And when you listen to it, actually, you notice that energy up top, that all that metallicness that is present is very much reduced, and it just makes for a way nicer sounding IEM. I mean, the difference is quite significant. I'm going to leave that graph of the foam on, okay, and I'm now going to put the graph of the LED Shure. I'm just going to change the color here. Okay, this is the graph of the LED Shure, the S12, and as you can see, look at that. Same kind of energy and bass as the S12, although when you listen to it, you feel that the bass of the S12, it's got a little bit more impact, but very similar. Everything very similar as well, peaking at around the same 2.5. And then the KZ's just got a little bit more energy, okay, from 2.5 to 7. And then it's got more energy past as well. Funny enough, when you do listen to it, the difference in this area is way less than what the graph would perhaps suggest. You would think that by seeing this, you were going to see a more significant difference. Personally, I don't. Okay, fine, fair enough. I'm already a middle-aged man. My hearing is not what it used to be, and perhaps the younger ones among us will notice more significantly this difference. But the graph is not really what showcasing what you actually do here. Excuse me. Let me put now this is the Stellaris. Just gonna put the Stellaris so you guys can see. And again, a little bit less bass than the other two, although when you actually do listen to it, and this is another case of the graph doesn't actually represent the reality of what you hear. When you actually do listen to it, and by the graph you would say that the Stellaris got about the same kind of bass. No, it doesn't. The energy of the Stellaris is slightly above in certain areas to the PR1, but it's actually below the PR1 at 5-6K. It's again above the PR1 at past 10K, and that is what you actually hear. You hear a more leaner sounding IEM with loads of energy up top. Okay, but as I mentioned, and when I did my review of the Stellaris, although it's got all that energy, I didn't find it offensive. I mean, with what I listened to, only with one or two songs was it ever that I reached the point where I was starting to get fatigued because of all that energy that it's got and all that. It honestly what I would say bugged me the most about the Stellaris was how not tonally correct it was. That was the thing that really, I would say, bugged me the most. It just sounds very thin. And then finally, let me just take those are the two out. Put the Wuzetian. That's the Wuzetian. And again, the same situation, very similar to the situation of the S12. Actually, if you paid careful attention, let me just put here the S12. You can see S12 on, off, on, off. The Wuzetian follows the same kind of bass curve as the PR1. Hi-fi with the foam tips. Falls a little bit behind in terms of the 2 to 3K area, and again 5 to 7. The PR1 is ahead and again past. But when you listen to it again, this difference, this what you see is not perceived as such. What you do perceive, and what I did notice, be it with the Wuzetian and with the S12, is that the Wuzetian and the S12 have got more bass impact, more bass presence. Okay, so that excessive amount of bass that perhaps was the issue with the PR1 and with the PLA is not what's happening when you use the foam tips. It sounds way more subdued. You could also argue that, okay, well, one is a 13.2 millimeter, the other one's a 14.5 and 14.8, and that's why you're seeing differences in the way that the bass quantity comes across. But from my understanding, the actual radiating area of the diaphragm of the 13.2mm from KZ is basically the same as the radiating area of the other ones. So I don't think it's there the reason. It's some other reason which I just cannot understand. Probably has to do with the driver, with the diaphragm material. Could be. And that's it, guys. I mean, Buzetian with PR1 with the foam tips. S12, let me just change the color. S12 again with the PR1. They all, as you can see, are very, very equal. I mean, there isn't. They trade blows. They honestly trade blows, and the KZ comes out on top because of the price. In terms of pure sound, yes, the Buzetian will be a better IEM in the winner. The S12 will also edge out slightly the KZ, unquestionably. But when you factor in the price, we're talking roughly a third to half the price, one and the others. So, the KZ has its value there. And honestly, if you don't have the money and you cannot afford, it's the IEM to go for. Anyway, guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions that you might have, please feel free to ask, and I'll do my very best to reply. All right, you take care now. Bye bye.